Right, and at least some light in the darkness. Tuesday, the 27th of December, has been declared a public holiday. We start here, though, with our bulletin. We're staring down the possibility of stage 8 blackouts. Eskom went from stages 3 and 4 to 6 within a matter of hours, and South Africans turned to social media to vent their frustration. Eskom says it needs to shed 6,000 megawatts from the power grid if we hope to prevent a complete blackout. This has had a detrimental effect on our economy, with businesses losing productivity. eNCA reporters are on the ground bringing us the very latest developments on the story. We're actually joined by senior reporter Aviwe Mtila, who's in Cape Town. Good morning, Aviwe. Just perhaps start by sharing your experience there in Cape Town. How has the load shedding been?
Good morning, Mfundo. And when it comes to load shedding, I mean, you know, from that traffic that I'm normally used to in Cape Town, as those traffic lights are off, one thing that has stood out in Cape Town is that there's none of that. All the traffic lights are actually working. As I was driving in the early morning rush hour traffic, every traffic light that I was met with was actually working. That's amid stage 6 that, of course, we're having. That's another difference. In Cape Town, it's actually stage 4 load shedding currently, while the rest of the nation is on stage 6. In fact, I want to get insight on how this is possible with the MMC of Energy in Cape Town. MMC Beverly van Reen, and thank you for joining us at eNCA. But let's start with that question then. Why are we on stage 4 here currently and not on stage 6 with the rest of the nation?
Good morning to you, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, we are on stage 4 today. And it is because we are able to mitigate and use the Steenbras hydro pump storage station. And I'm sure, by now you know, how it works. And so we are in a better position, to protect our customers and also our infrastructure. So it assists, and also, it becomes increasingly difficult, when it's higher stages. And sadly so, yesterday, we did the electrification project where we switched on electricity in Overcome Heights. And as soon as we switched it on, Eskom announced that they will, in fact, go to a higher stage, and that was stage 6. To the extent where they, in fact, dumped the community into darkness. So it's really, really not, it's really not fair.
Let's go to the traffic lights. I'm assuming that UPSs are at play there, where they keep the traffic lights running. But then in Johannesburg, I know there's the issue of theft around those UPSs. How are you mitigating that the traffic lights still stay on amid the crime levels?
Thank you to Alderman J.P. Smith and his neighborhood watches. they are really very vigilant. But also, I think that our law enforcement officers, they are on the ground. And so they ensure, that there is no vandalism when it comes to our electricity, our robots and so forth. So with all of our other infrastructure, it really is also just extremely difficult because, we have thousands of cables, thousands of kilometers of cables, and there is just no way that we will be able to protect all of our infrastructure. But with our special unit that will soon be on the ground, I'm sure, that we will make a huge impact in protecting our infrastructure.
And just lastly, MMC, there are threats of stage 8, as we heard from Eskom yesterday. How are you going to keep the lights on? What's going to happen for Cape Town?
It's really very, it's increasingly difficult. The higher those stages, it is increasingly difficult. We have, yes, the Steenbras hydro pump station, and we do have our turbines, but also, increasingly expensive, of course, to get those turbines running. So, yeah, all I can say is that it will be a challenge to the city of Cape Town.
It will be a challenge. Thank you very much, MMC. I actually want to bring in J.P. Smith, MMC of Community and Security, which I do understand. We heard that you're the ones that are keeping the lights on when it comes to the traffic lights. But I understand also there is the disaster management center that's in place for stage 6. Do tell us about that.
So we're just on the traffic lights. Obviously, it's a challenge. Even with the UPSs, even with doing our best with our enforcement, the metal theft unit and the facility protection officer program that we've rolled out, even with those interventions, we do have vandalism and theft of these facilities. Those batteries are valuable, and it creates situations where we have to deploy officers. as the load shedding gets bigger and more frequent, multiple areas start being down simultaneously. And that means you have to push more and more staff into dealing with these large areas without load shedding as pointsmen. So we have roving teams of officers who, as intersections go down, or if the load shedding is too frequent and the batteries don't have a chance to properly recharge or become defective over time, that there are pointsmen in those intersections. We don't get 100% coverage, but we do try and cover the most important intersections as best we can. It's a huge challenge and it eats up a lot of enforcement resources. And that's compounded by the fact that during load shedding, especially at night, there are high crime areas, areas of gang activity, where the presence of or the lack of electricity makes for an extremely dangerous environment. So we are allocating additional resources to those nodes during these times to try and make sure that we can keep a lid on the violence, keep public violence from erupting, that we can contain any gang activity as best we can. And that, of course, is also making a serious resource impact. So all of this is, of course, fueled by overtime budget. So this will eat a huge hole in our overtime budget. This is going to drive these kind of stage 6+ interventions, drive millions and millions of rands of overtime every weekend. You can be sure that this period year alone will add 2-3 million rands overtime for these few days on stage 6. The Disaster Operations Centre that you referenced is working. They're going full tilt, 23 external agencies, including all of our own internal agencies, focusing on water, electricity, your core services. Water pump stations become vulnerable. They need electricity to work, so you have to have generators on standby. Those generators have to be refilled. They have to be guarded. You have to make sure that your water treatment work, otherwise your water quality starts impairing. You have the traffic lights you have to attend to. The lack of electricity causes other problems. So last night we had a fire in Montague Gardens in the industrial area there in a factory. So it creates all kinds of other incidents, and therefore you have all that staff sitting there on standby with all these agencies to quickly and rapidly deal with and intervene in any situation that arises so we can keep the city running smoothly.
And when it comes to finances, how much are we talking about that you have to cough out additionally just to maintain what we're seeing from stage 6 on being on stage 4? And now that there are talks of a possible stage 8, will it be sustainable, the Disaster Management Centre? What plans do you have in place?
So remember, we also have festive season. At the moment, we have large numbers of tourists that have returned, for which we are deeply grateful. Our economy relies in part on tourism. These returning visitors bring a lot of employment and job creation with them, domestic and foreign. So that is already putting huge strain on us. We have extra traffic officers to manage certain areas, to manage your coastal areas, to manage your recreation amenities, to be present at shopping malls and other areas where congestion is creating problems. And now the load shedding on top of that becomes really crippling. I can guess, if I look at our total overtime budget, that the collective overtime over this year is probably going to cost around 100 million, if I had to estimate, 100 to 120 million, that if you go and disentangle what we spend on coping with load shedding, if you pull that out of the overall overtime budget, that's probably the vicinity of where it's going to be. That's aside from all the other costs that you would need to add for infrastructure that goes down and breaks, chilling or cooling infrastructure, wastage from spoilables that where a large fridge will go off and not kick back on again for whatever reason. The same problems that restaurants and hotels and others are having. So a myriad of consequences that are created by load shedding that makes people's lives really, really difficult.
And stage 8, what will you do, Disaster Management Centre?
So that means we ramp everything up, bring in more staff on overtime, bring in more staff from leave. All your standby staff, you have staff who are on standby duty, they all get invoked. So more numbers to deal with all of your problems, to look after more of your infrastructure because you become a lot more vulnerable. Stage 8 becomes truly damaging, and I think for the international community and investors, it sends very dangerous signs, because I don't know how you keep a factory or other things working on that basis, and how you keep generators running on diesel with diesel supply problems at this stage. And of course, just making sure all of our vehicles have fuel and diesel becomes a significant logistical matter all by itself.
All right, thank you very much. JP Smith, MMC of Community and Security in Cape Town. As you heard, those plans there, threats of stage 8, and of course the question of what it will do to the economy, never mind the 100 million rand plus dent that stage 6 is already having in Cape Town.